Hi, everybody. Welcome to Disability in Animation. This is a thank you. This is a history lesson on disabled characters, specifically in animated media. I'm not going to talk too much often in like comics and stuff like that, or video games, because that will be significantly longer, especially as video games, being a lot newer, have done a lot more for diversity than animation has. So let's get started with where did everything start? Who was the first disabled character in animation? Surprisingly enough, it was good old Peg Leg Pete, as we all might know him as Pete from Walt Disney. He first showed up in a show called Alice's Comedies, which was a live action and animation style series with a little girl who went by Alice. This was one of the first like real like kind of cartoons that was aired on television, and he was created by a guy named Norm Fergie Ferguson. Please remember that name for later because he is an important player in all of this. Our second character we're going to meet is going to be Dopey. He was the second ever or the first ever animated character to be disabled to show up in animated media, specifically in the very first animated film. Unfortunately, Pierce did not have great ideas and like how making Dopey. Specifically, right now, Disney still to this day does not actually claim him as a deaf character or mute character, even though he is very clearly mute. He is not claimed as disabled at all. He's just a silly little guy. Unfortunately, when they were like designing him, and you look at earlier designs, though, he was not very. It gets worse from there, essentially. When describing how to make Dopey and making his design, which later became him becoming selectively mute, very specifically mute completely, they literally described him as dog-like. To have a dog-like personality, you know, happy, bubbly. It was an extreme form of infantilization, and this was incredibly normal during that time, and it did not make it okay at all, especially when you realize where a lot of their inspiration was coming from, being vaudeville. Here we have Harpo Marx. He was known in vaudeville as the dunce character. A dunce character is somebody who does, you know, silly little guy things, essentially. Unfortunately, Harpo's character the character he played named Harpo was deaf, mute, and I use quotations because he was specifically just mute. He was not playing a deaf character, although Harpo himself insists that the character was just selectively mute and actually could talk the entire time, but it's just so silly that there's all these misunderstandings because he doesn't know how to communicate. This is where a lot of the inspiration for our earlier cartoons came from because vaudeville was such a big deal. And unfortunately, as we all know, vaudeville wasn't necessarily a great place to be gathering a lot of this, as disability was treated as the butt of the joke to all of this. Sorry. So this is where like a lot of the inspiration came from. Very specifically, Harpo was used as inspiration specifically for Dopey, which gives you more of that reason to understand why they would literally describe him the way they did. They were basing it off of somebody who literally played a character very similar to that. Harpo did later on, did later on start doing talkies. And you know, when we finally added like things went from mute to like talking on television and movies, and in the talkies, he did develop the character Harpo, where he did start talking completely after never doing that beforehand, which is why he insists that Harpo was not mute. Furthering into the inspiration, we can see like how big was vaudeville back then. You can actually go back to a bunch of the Mother Goose Goes to Hollywood and Silly Symphonies, or Walt Disney's Mickey's Polo Team, and you're gonna see a lot of these vaudevillian actors showing up as characters in the cartoons. It was incredibly normal to see them more than like Mickey Mouse back then, because this is what everyone knew throughout the country much better than they did a cartoon character. So when introducing cartoon characters and trying to like get people to watch stuff, these were people that everyone in the country knew. So they're going to use IP, or not IP, but characters people knew, being vaudeville characters, which were crazy characterizations of multiple people in not great ways. As you can see, Harpo is the blonde on the side, messing with Donald, and he's also on the bottom, along with tons of other very famous vaudevillian actors of the time period. So now we're going to move forward into what's going on in Japan at this time. This is about the 1940s and how they viewed disability. We're going to start with specifically a comic in the specifically because this was in like the early 70s and the anime came out very quickly after with Himakimaru in Dororo back in the 1960s. Got the date wrong, my bad. The whole point was that he was deaf, blind, had no arms, he had no legs, he had no skin, he's cursed from birth to be disabled, and that curse is because he's been cursed by demons, therefore he is bad and evil. And the literal plot is he kills demons to become less disabled. As he kills them, he can gain his limbs back, he can gain his skin back, his eyes, all that. This was written by Tezuka, the grandfather of anime himself, and while very much the anime does depict back in feudal Japan, so feelings that would have been more aligned with the time period, it still isn't completely appropriate that you have your disabled character being shown as you can heal him from the problems because he's bad. So we do see that like he was even back in the 60s, this was something that like we saw in, they were still making animated cartoons and stuff with disabled characters. So like the representation goes really far back, all the way from the beginning. Oops, sorry. How everything changed. Unfortunately, we are going to have to talk about war now because the atomic bombs changed everything, not just for the entire world and specifically Japan, but animation itself. When you live in a country where one of the worst tragedies ever has happened, that could possibly happen to you, and a large portion of your population, portion of your population is now disabled, you're going to become a lot more readily understanding towards disability than other people, specifically for the survivors who went through that. Which is where we move into Barefoot Gin. Barefoot Gin was written in 1973 by Kenji Nakazawa. He was a survivor of Hiroshima. And it took him a very long time to battle with himself about writing this manga. I'm specifically mentioning the manga because the anime came out very quickly afterwards, like within about 3 years. This was a highly debated series because he did not shy away at any moment about what he experienced and what he saw. While the author does not, this is the most graphic I will show you, as the author does show you significantly more graphic within the first few pages. There is people literally melting. And he did not want to shy away at any moment from any of the horrors that he experienced because he wanted to make sure people understood what really happened. I apologize, I get emotional about that because I'm really proud of him being able to find that voice because this anime did eventually get banned in Japan, mostly because, as we've learned now, the people who lived there in the villages were completely unaware of what was about to happen, but the government was aware. And that led to a lot of naturally hurt feelings and distrust amongst the people when later finding out what went down. But this did also add to this massive change we start seeing immediately. Mostly because this was part of Weekly Shonen Jump. So you have back in the 70s, Weekly Shonen Jump showing up with this manga, which is going to start influencing all big animators and mangaka we know now, including even here in the States. Barefoot Gin did come out in English. It is something, if you can stomach it, I highly suggest reading or even watching the animation or the live action adaptation. It is very popular in Japan. Like I mentioned briefly earlier, it did get banned at one point, and it was mostly due to the fact that upon watching it, viewing it, and understanding, it led to people starting to understand a lot of this could have been fully avoided. And it wasn't just the fault of it wasn't the fault of one country, but the fault of two at this point, and just brought a lot of hurt feelings to everybody, as it should. So that actually helped inspire somebody else. We start seeing a big shift in the 80s, so not long after Barefoot Gin came out. And here we have Hayao Miyazaki, as we all know. Hayao Miyazaki started off with his first series. He tried to make a movie, being Nausicaa of the Wind, where the main character has a bionic arm and two prosthetic legs, because that's not armor. Though she does not have an arm or two legs. Miyazaki grew up reading things like Barefoot Game. He also grew up in a post-war world where he had to watch these horrors happen, which very much radicalized him as a person. The quote of like, the world is bad, but not all bad. Very much how when you watch Miyazaki, almost everything he does has some sort of disabled character, and his characterization is incredibly realistic and good. As like, they can be villains, they can be good guys, but the disability isn't the focus of the character. It's just treated as it is. This is something very normalized out in Japan, because again, when you had a portion of the survivors all becoming permanently disabled, you've become very accustomed to this being your norm. Kushina was incredibly well written. He had to start off with writing the manga because no one wanted to make this be a movie because they thought it would not go by well. Specifically because the film very clearly also pulls off from the post-apocalyptic war, specifically the feelings he had towards the atomic bombs. So, already we're seeing very massive, coming from a horrible tragedy. We see the change already happening where people are saying, I can, through my pain, I can make art, which is like, beautiful. And I love that they can do, find an outlet for that. So already we're going like 20 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour with Japan, whereas like here in the US, we're not doing too great so far. However, we're getting better with stuff specifically in anime, because we start seeing a lot more disabled representation in anime than we are in Western media. Biggest reason of that being there's so many anime studios out there, and a country again where you just have you have built a society around helping the disabled, whereas we have not done that, and we also have like very few studios, and just got into indie animation becoming a new and big thing. So we're just starting to catch up where Japan has been for a very long time. A lot of things have gotten better, specifically Himakimaru. They actually did a reboot of his show, and they did a lot better about it. Well, yeah, he's still cursed, they just made him a much more well-rounded character. He never fully gets his ability to hear back, and like there's moments in the anime where you can see kind of how he sees, and he never gets his vision back. His body parts don't come back. The most he gets back is like his skin, but he learns to adapt a lot better, and we're not looking at it nearly as much as a curse this time. They did a lot better with this. And the one thing I can say between both versions that's really cool is he has swords as his prosthetics for his arms and legs, and like, I don't know anybody who wouldn't want that if they have prosthetics. Like, Tezuka, like, absolutely cooked when he was sitting here thinking about this design. Like, I highly suggest, like, if you're gonna give this series a try, though, definitely the reboot. It's a lot less, while it's more accurate to they kept it accurate to the time period that it's happening, they're not gonna be as, like, looking at things in such a terrible way. They saw where, like, hey, this was a little wrong to depict it this way. Let's fix that. Anime has just all around been really great with this. We have, most people when they think of anime, you're going to think in disabled characters, you're thinking of Edward Elric, who is genuinely one of the best disabled characters written. Not only do we get to see the pain he endures through his prosthetics, which, like, while yes, his automail is connected to his nerve system, the way they depict the pain that he goes through when having those on is not uncommon from type of pain that people with prosthetics will experience, because no matter what the material's made of, it's rubbing against your skin all day. It hurts. It's uncomfortable. We get to see him do that. We also see the fact that, like, very similar to realistic how people feel about things, there's going to be days where you're upset that you don't, that you have a prosthetic. There's going to be days where it's just how your life is. People don't treat him differently because of that. They treat him differently because he's short. The butt of the joke every time. But it's fantastic because, like, you have an author and a creator who did a really great job, who clearly, not only did her research, but she sat there and clearly talked to people about their lived experiences. one of my personal favorites is Kumiko from Josie the Tiger and the Fish. It is a film and also a manga about a disabled woman who lives in Japan, and I genuinely love that she's kind of a huge jerk in the beginning. There is like a plot reason to that, but I really enjoy the fact that they don't stray away from the fact that like we're still just people, because in a lot of media we are shown as like either super powered or like, you know, some level of we're gonna overcome it, and we're really really nice people. But like Josie is straight up like really mean in the beginning, and like there is a legit reason through the movie. I really enjoyed that they showed that, but I really enjoy how they showcased in Japan, when you are disabled, there's tons of aid out there that your family can help you get, so you can live independently and get help and get access and accessibility and all that. And that is like a point chosen in shown in the movie and showcased and talked about. But I really love that she's very independent, and the love interest in the movie for her does not baby her at any point. He, like, if she wants to go have a fit and roll off and go somewhere, he'll just let her do that. And he'll be like, okay, bye then. You know, it's really great depiction of like how that can be in real life. And just, again, we have just excellent representation going on. And like that has come through the years of lived experience mostly. Now, when we're talking about like American animation, we have in getting better in our depictions, I would really always love to show people Long John Silver from Treasure Planet. Specifically, when they designed this character, they knew from the get-go he was going to be a disabled character, mostly because in the book of Treasure Island, he's disabled. He is missing. He has a peg leg. So specifically when doing animation reels and trying to design his character from the get-go, when they started the design, they actually wanted to learn how somebody would walk like that. So they began working with how would this person's canter be, and how would it be different because you're not using a prosthetic leg? How would it be in using a prosthetic, you know, a little foot like that, his little peg leg? You can also see like great input put into the design and like how he's proud of his, you know, his parts that aren't real. He's very happy to be an android, which I really, really love. But some of my favorite bits in the movie is the realistic way they show that a lot of us who are disabled, be that physically or non-visible, prosthetic or none, how we will have to show up in front of people and be that big, brave, strong person who does not need assistance. And then in his quiet moments where he'll have to sit down and like show you that he's in pain and he hurts, and he only shows his soft moments when he needs to. And it's not just specific, even in his soft moments of showing his like kindness towards Jim, even when it's not being manipulative, he still won't even show Jim the softer moments of, my leg hurts because I'm sitting on this all day, even though, like, you know, this is what I want. You know, he can move his arms however he wants, but it still hurts up here in his arm. And you see moments where he literally sits there and rubs on it, which is fantastic. I really love, like, they did a really fantastic job with this character, not only in his design, but in his creation, especially because Peg Leg Pete's inspiration did come from Long John Silver from Treasure Planet, but specifically a specific actor who played him back in the first ever live action edition. And while that was a fantastic showing, they didn't put into the perspective the same way you're going to see here with Treasure Planet, where they did put into perspective, how is somebody going to move like that? What's the difference there? So here we see, you know, things getting a lot better with us in the 2000s, because at this point, our people are being inspired by Hayao Miyazaki. So we're sitting here watching and normalizing things where we see movies where it's normalized for somebody to be disabled. With a lot of our animators now being our age, you know, our peers who've grown up with anime, where we're seeing, you know, the regularly disabled people, or ourselves knowing that disability is not like as, we're not pushing it away anymore. So it's all hidden. So we're going to talk a little bit about Avatar, specifically Korra. Granted, I could talk about the Avatar series for hours because it has genuinely the greatest depiction of disability I've ever seen in an animated series, like bar none. We all know Toph. We all love Toph. We know about the the air riders, and one of them being a wheelchair user, and just fantastic depiction of how people really do feel about things like that. But I do like focusing on Korra specifically because it is very close to me. Because a lot of people tend to focus in on the fact of when Korra specifically becomes physically disabled. Um, they do an incredible job at portraying her PTSD. Korra goes through a moment where she is about to die, or she does actually die for a bit. Her heart stops for a bit. They are able to get her back. But through the torture she experienced of being hunted by people, messed her up fundamentally, and we see depictions of her going through PTSD from like all throughout season 4, where she's having moments of being haunted by her past. Not only that, one of my favorite things that they depict through it, that is really hard for me personally, because I'm going to be honest, as a part-time wheelchair user, I have not rewatched Korra since I started using my wheelchair, because all of my friends who are wheelchair users had explained to me that like how realistic it is, the moment where Korra's sitting down, people are helping her, and we all focus in at that ending where you see her cry. And like realistically, we all understand it's that, loss of I'm being taken care of. I'm supposed to take care of them, and now they're taking care of me. But it's also how everyone now fundamentally treats her different from this moment onward, and they're never going to treat her the same ever again. Except Milo. Milo is the only one who doesn't. And I wish I could find the picture for it again, but like there's a bit where Milo literally uses his airbending to just sit in her lap, and he's just talking, like rolling around on her, and like so that like she never loses that connection with him. So like you can definitely feel like I love that, because that's just one, realistic to his character. Two, that's my favorite depiction, and my preferred way of showing that scene, because I don't like showing the scene where she cried, because the day I realized I needed to start using a wheelchair even part-time, very much the same feeling of all of a sudden everything changed. All of my friends have treated me completely different, whether they intend to or not, and like whether that be for good or bad. And it's not a negative, but there's days where that is really difficult on me and really difficult on other people. I never fully understood until I was in that exact position how well done this scene was, just showing the single tear go down, and also just how well they've showcased the physical therapy that Korra goes through. Physical therapy is incredibly brutal on the body, and they did not shy away at any moment of showcasing the anger, the frustration, how hard that is, not just on you physically, but mentally, especially going from my body functions the way it's supposed to it's not doing what I need it to. Why is it not functioning the way I need it to? That can be really raw feelings. And I don't know who they were talking to or who sat there and helped coach the writers, but I want to thank the writers for like doing that, because they very clearly took this from inspiration from people who have actually gone through this, which is again why it's really hard for me to watch Korra, because as much as she is my favorite, because I related to her in the beginning, the more I relate to her, the harder it is to watch her go through that journey and then watch someone else hit that exact moment as me of, oh, everyone's gonna treat me different now. Things are different in my life now. And like, I genuinely think like we peaked in media at this point. Like, we did it. We got what we've been looking for. Like, you have so many like different disabilities being showcased throughout the series, but also like, again, that real raw factor that in a kid's show nonetheless, things that like we, our parents told us, oh, don't ask, don't look, but they just sat here and said, showed you how real this can be, how difficult like her mental health becomes, where she spends most of the 4th season trying, she's never going to recover from her PTSD. It will always be something that haunts her, but having to be haunted by like not only using your own powers, but also having to be haunted by the fact that there was somebody out there who so desperately believed you needed to not exist that they were going to do anything about that, and how that just, it hurts. It messed her up really bad. She spends night, you see moments where like she's trying to fight those demons physically, which not abnormal for some people to go through when having moments like this. Just fantastic writing. Now, typically villains are going to be viewed at, the disabled villain. very big trope we all know about. I like to usually mention Hook from um, Peter Pan. Fantastic character, totally allowed to love him. At the same time, when we look back at the fact that he's literally named Hook because he has a hook for a hand, like his personality is his disability. Also, his like absolute manic. I need Peter Pan, like to the degree of like mania borderline. Absolutely silly. Also, can be viewed as like really unfortunate to people who do experience stuff like that. And clearly going through stuff, especially when you look back at the book. There is a sequel book specifically about Hook that does not make any of it better, and then you remember this was a book written in the 1930s in England. And then you remember why his name is Hook and why he's the villain, and specifically only the villain can be disabled. And that was a big thing we had in media for a long time, but now we have better written characters. We have Catra, who absolutely shows symptoms of PTSD and borderline personality disorder, which is not. Borderline personality is what most of you will probably think of when you're thinking of bipolar disorder. That mood drop can come out of nowhere. You can go through what's called splitting, where literally everything goes to black and white. It's right or it's wrong. This can happen towards your favorite person. We see Catra showcase this a lot when it comes down to her feelings towards Adora. 1 minute, she'll be completely fine, wants Adora, and then literally on the drop of a hat, she's turned around and Adora's the villain. She left me. She hurt me. Clear signs of borderline personality disorder. And it's really well written, especially when you start seeing early on the favoritism she was used in early childhood to be abused by her caretaker, being Shadow Weaver. Specifically, I always but I like mentioning how during one of the seasons, Shadow Weaver actively uses Catra. By giving her that love and attention she has always wanted, needed, craved, and needed. She's only in her, she's 18 to 24 through the series, so she's still in these very early stages of life. These are the formative years of her where this neuroplasticity is hitting. And when Shadow Weaver takes advantage of that, even though we, the audience, understand she's being taken advantage of, and Catra herself knows she's being taken advantage of, she cannot stop herself from showing that love and attention towards somebody who she desperately has needed it from her whole life, adding to the abuse she's gone through to the point where she's pushing away the only good people in her life. She showcases her symptoms incredibly well, and they do not shy away from the fact that, this girl needs therapy. Catrack's therapy every day. She struggles really hard through this, and it makes the moments where she just finally breaks down make sense. Why this woman is going through all of this, because she spent her whole life. I'm aware of the fact that I'm with the villains, but I don't care, because that's survival for her. That's all she's ever known and been taught. And when all we've known and been taught is abuse, that's what we're going to start reciprocating back to people. Which is why when we introduce the character Milog later on, where she's finally able to deal with her emotions, she gets a lot better. Albeit a little too quickly, the show was canceled before they could actually do a full season, which was going to be a full redemption arc of her actually, over the course of a year, learning about her emotions, how to identify them and stuff. And these are actually symptoms I really love that they talk about with Milog, being that DBT being a type of therapy people do, specifically if you have BPD or autism, it's great for. And one of the things you have to do is learning to identify your own emotions, because we have a hard time with it. Catra, at a moment, literally, Milog is next to her, and because Milog can show her what she's feeling and she can physically see what her emotions are, she takes a moment and goes, I am angry at you right now, but I cannot keep getting angry because it makes the creature angry. Before they realize the name of the cat being Milog. And it's great to see, while they don't have, therapy in her world necessarily, how, despite everything she's been through, when she finally is confronted with what she needs to see, what the help she needs and the assistance, it starts working and she starts becoming better. She's not a villain because she's disabled. She's a villain who happens to be disabled. Now we have Hordak, where he's a villain who happens to be disabled as well. And I really like that it did play into his story. Part of his origin story being that he was cast out because he was imperfect. He was not a perfect clone of Horde Prime. This made him turn around and say, okay, if I'm not perfect, even though I did everything better than everyone else, then I'm going to turn around and show you how awesome I can be on my own. Turning around and wanting to showcase that you are powerful on your own and that his disability doesn't stop him. He takes us into the very toxic level, though, that a lot of us do, where we overwork ourselves, we push too hard, we do more than we should, which is why introducing Entrapta, another disabled character who, while not canonically in the show announced as autistic, has been confirmed by the creators, writers, and animators that they designed and worked on her specifically to be autistic, including the voice actress who's confirmed this. You have somebody who looks at him and just says that, like, you know, your imperfections are beauty. He finally meets somebody who sees him as he is, and he doesn't have to try hard to be accepted and to be loved and cared for. He's the villain, he's bad, and his disability is part of the reason why he's doing what he does, but we still see it in a much better narrative than, like, he's just a villain because he's disabled. We don't know he's disabled for most of the show. It's not towards, like, the middle of it that we actually even find out, like, what had happened to him and what he looks like under his armor. He hates that he's like this, and a lot of us do go through these experiences. But when finally confronted with a friend who cares, loves, and gives him the nurturing that he needs, he's able to start help moving forward through that and accepting himself as he is. So, change is good. What can we do about it? As we've seen through this, we've seen a lot of massive changes in animation where we're doing much better all around with, like, our writing and what we're doing with characters, but clearly there's still a lot more we can do in both sides of the media, being Western and Eastern. The biggest change we need to start making is less coded characters. I enjoy a good coded character. They're fantastic, but we need to stop doing that. It's really difficult when I go and watch a movie and then look at my parent, or one of my parents who happens to have a master's degree in psychology, and she can sit there and be like, yeah, this character is absolutely autistic, or this character has this, but they don't mention it during the thing at all because the director who created them didn't even realize, because they're pulling it off of real life friends of theirs who's undiagnosed. That's why we need to start, like, being more loud about how we feel about these characters. My personal favorite being Lilo. I saw that movie twice in theaters. I've always related to her. My mother has multiple times confirmed over, my God, she'd be diagnosed so quickly if given the right, like, what she needs. She clearly showcases autism, like, from the way she interacts with the world, from the way, like, she doesn't even realize her friends, quote unquote, are bullying her. She goes through, she doesn't realize that Stitch is not acting well. She doesn't, like, pick up on social cues at any point. And yet, at no point are we given the reason of her being autistic, which, had that been said out loud at any point during the film, makes things hit a lot harder, specifically the scene where Lilo is going to be given up and Nani says she needs me. It's not just because she needs Nani because that's her sister. She needs her sister because Lilo is autistic, and you are separating a young autistic child who's gone through severe trauma from the only family member she has and the only person who understands the way she functions. Lilo's 4 years old. At that point in time, it would actually be very detrimental to remove her from that situation, because she's going to have meltdowns all the time. She's not going to do well, and they're going to have to send her through severe therapy that she wouldn't otherwise need, because she's doing okay with Nani and handling everything. So yeah, we need to have less coded characters. Lilo's fantastic. I love her, but, like, knowing she was autistic would have helped me a lot as well. I saw this when I was 10 years old. I would have been diagnosed at 10 had they said she was autistic. I'm just saying. Another big thing is, again, we saw this mostly in, like, Japanese media, where they're listening more to disabled voices because it's common there. You have a lot more accommodation towards that. Here in the US, not so much. But I do like to always point out, if you're basing your characters off of undiagnosed neurospicy friends, and that's your whole friend group, I'm just saying, I've talked to a few animators before about things, and I've read things. specific with the character Mercy in Amphibia, very clearly autistically coded character. And when told that, Matt Bradley, the creator, had to say, I based her off of a friend of mine, personally didn't write her to be autistic, so I can't claim that. But if the autistic community wants to and say she's autistic, by all means, I just can't, because I don't know enough to say that. And while I love that, I'm also just kind of like, Matt Bradley, you have autism and ADHD so bad. I can't, like, I think. I can't be quoted on that, but, like, having interacted with him even briefly, he's neurospicy of something you gotta be into. If you're in animation, if you're in the animation field, you're not neurotypical. It does not exist. I have a friend who just graduated from animation college, and they're like, everyone here's neurodivergent, and most of them don't know. So that's how, we can make characters better. We can do a lot better when we start listening to our voices, when we start like hearing what people have to say, start looking more towards that. We are seeing a move towards that, but we're still not fully there. The biggest reason for this has to be because when it comes down to animation companies here in the West, we very much like to we want to play to what the shareholders want. What's safe? What's safe is them playing the game they've been playing because they're all older, white gentlemen who've been through this for a long time. The safe way to play is hide your disabled people. Don't show that they're disabled. Pixar has done one of the better steps towards that, being they have the rule of 3, being that you have to have 3 disabled characters visible on screen for, even if in the background, for a certain amount of time per film. That's why in Turning Red, I don't know if anyone noticed, but there's actually 3 characters who have monitors on their arms for their blood sugar, and this is because one of the animators herself actually has diabetes. So it was added in specifically as it was something she knew and knew how to not only talk to everyone else about and how to explain, she was able to showcase that in a good and healthy way. That's where we see like steps of going forward and better. But even with the rule of 3, we're still not seeing enough, where we need to see more of this. A lot of that's going to come from the fact of like finally diagnosing people, getting better at like, talking about these things instead of just being quiet. Some of our best showcases have recently left, being one of my personal favorites. I don't have a picture of on here. The Ghost of Molly McGee, season 2, starts off with a new character who outright walks right up to the main character, smells a turnip, says, "Ew, that's disgusting, I don't like that," gives it back to her, and her mom goes, "Hey, take a moment." And she goes, "Oh, yeah, I'm autistic, I'm really loud and not everyone can handle that." Just leaves it at that. She doesn't apologize for what she does. And like, it is a shame that show got canceled, and they because like her special interest happens to be what her whole family is into and her family's career. And so you do run into the small trope of she's highly intelligent for like a girl her age, but you do also, like, they did a good job of helping to make that make sense in the series of it's an interest her family also shares. It's something she's surrounded by every day, so they can foster that attention and love of hers. But also very clearly, her father is very autistic too. Clearly undiagnosed in the series, but they like made a point of that too to showcase why this works for her. But it was just, I'm never gonna get over like just the scene opening and her just going, "I'm autistic," and me like, I've never seen that before. Like, that's fantastic, especially again on a kid's cartoon. That's what we need more representation to look like. We need to start seeing more things like this. We're getting there. We're still really slow about it because, especially as we're trying to put more of this in media, it's being canceled. It's being stopped from happening. So we need to start being louder when we're in these spaces of what we want to see. When we see disabled characters, even if we don't like 100%, agree with what's going on, put that criticism in there in a constructive way where we can start showing these showrunners what we want to see. I promise you, they want to put it in there as badly as you want it to be there, but they're being stopped from doing that. So like, part of it's on us, but most of it's on those shareholders who really need to grow up and realize that like, disabled people are here, and we don't want to be put into a corner of guessing whether or not the character is that. We want to know for real, this is who they are, and because it can help a lot of people help identify themselves, symptoms that they're experiencing. So yeah, thank you all so much for coming to my chat. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all.